Welcome to Sober Talk. I'm Dennis and I'm an alcoholic. Sober today thanks to Alcoholics Anonymous. If you or anyone you know is struggling with alcohol, please call Alcoholics Anonymous on 1300 222222 or visit their website at aa.org.au. I'll just run through the preamble of Alcoholics Anonymous. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of people who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other, that they may solve their common problems and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for a membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. It is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution. It does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses or opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics achieve sobriety.
She was talking about her family and her past and her childhood, and that's something I've never shared about. But like they say, we don't regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it. And I don't remember my childhood very much at all. I blocked it all out. I remember things like at 7 years old, I was sent away to boarding school, and I wouldn't see my parents for weeks on end. And there was a lot of physical abuse there with beatings and stuff like that. All boys' schools, all my schools were boys' schools. And then I went to another school because my grades weren't that good, and there was physical abuse and sexual abuse. And then I went to another school, and it was the same, exactly the same. And then the fourth school I went to, it was just two of us in the school. It was like cramming to get our exams passed. And we used to cycle to school, and I went down the hill and onto the road, not stopping, which is what we did every morning. And there was a van coming up, and I suddenly braked, turned around, and he came around, he went bang, and died instantly. And those are things I remember about my childhood. So the day I finished school was the day I started life. And my life was living I moved to Spain with my sister to open a restaurant with her, and life was freedom. You know, it was this new free life I was living where I could do what I wanted to. And of course there was lots of drinking, and I just did everything. I mean, my drinking started way before that, but I had the freedom to be able to do it, not secretly. And I guess that all those years, it was just moving on to the next thing, the next situation, the next scenario, the next relationship. And nothing was ever a problem. I got into heavy drugs when I was about 18, 19, lots late 60s, early 70s. It was all that type of thing, London, hallucinogens, and lots of drinking went on. I think I stopped drinking for two years when I was really getting into other things, but that was my life. And I did a lot of traveling and a lot of moving around, and I just loved it. And one thing I always vowed I'd never do is do heroin, because I could see the damage it did. And within a year after making that commitment, I was sticking needles in my arm. And but I would always drink. And you know, it that madness and that insanity and that harm that I was doing went on continually for 26 years. And I used geographicals and relationships to try and keep my head above water, just to try and, you know, not fall into the trappings. But it didn't always help. And what happened was I got married. I got married in New York to an American, and I moved over there for a while. And once again, I'd moved to different towns, different states, and it would all start off with just drinking, and then it wouldn't take long where I found anything else and everything else that I needed. And alcohol was always the one that instigated everything that I did. Once I had that in my system, I had no control what was going to go in my system next, but I needed the alcohol to make those rash decisions. And I got in California, I got done for drunk driving in 1983, and I had to go to AA once a week on a Wednesday night. And I was allowed to drive, and I had a shot of heroin, and I go and sit at the back, and I would not hear a word that was being said, but all I did was get my piece of paper signed, and the courts were happy with that. But one thing I did realize, there was something called Alcoholics Anonymous, which I had no idea. And then for the next 9 years, I realized that there was something that could help me live a new life, but I just couldn't manage it. I could not just, I'd do it for 1 day or 2 days, and day 3 was always my downfall. Day 3 was the one where, it was the mind that got me. I'd get through that physical aspects for the first couple of days, and then I could never get past day 3. And that happened for 9 years. And I took my wife, my then wife, to Sydney from California. My idea was I was going to commit suicide over in Sydney. I don't know why I couldn't have done it in California, but I had this idea I was going to do it in Sydney. And that never happened. But the madness and the insanity started taking over, and I got hold of what I needed, and I drank the whole time, and it was just madness. And by that time, my wife had enough, and she changed all the locks on the door. This was 1989 by this point, and she'd packed 2 garbage bags full of my clothes with 3 left shoes in it, and sent me packing. And I moved into a bedsit, and I would buy whatever poisons I could to put in my system on a daily basis, and that's how I lived. I lived off chocolate eclairs and whatever alcohol and drugs I could afford. And 30th of April, 1989, I remember it really well because it was my brother's birthday. He was in England, but it was my brother's birthday. And 10 o'clock in the morning, I dropped to my knees and I prayed to a God I did not believe in. But nothing else was left. I had tried every human power possible to try and change the way I was living my life, and nothing was working. And that night, after praying out of total surrender, I ended up in a rehab and managed to stay there for 8 months. And after 8 months, I was physically healthy. I would be praying, so I was spiritually trying to get fit spiritually. Would go to meetings, but I couldn't understand what they were all about. I'd have people tell me that I didn't belong in AA, that I should be in another fellowship. This is in country New South Wales, but I had no option to change that, and did halfway. And after 8 months, got back to the big smoke, and within 2 weeks, I was picking up a drink. That's the insanity for me, that after 26 years of trying to change my life and get on the straight and narrow, that I would get 8 months up and I'd get right back into it again. I couldn't believe it. I thought I had failed completely. And of course, I was in Sydney. I had to get out of there. I went up to Queensland. I got beaten up in Airlie Beach. I got done for drunk driving in Cairns. Had to live in my pedal wagon. I stayed up there, and then I flew to England. Hated it there, flew back to Sydney, hated it there, flew back to England again. I could not live in my own skin, basically. Moved in with a pregnant woman who eventually threw me out. Ended up living at my mother's house, stealing whatever money I could to just put whatever poisons I could into my system on a daily basis. And suddenly what happened was there was no more money left in the purse. I couldn't take any more. I had nothing. And I said to my mother, "I'm going to be really sick." And she said, "Yeah, I know." And see, the strange thing is I thought no one knew. But they did. And she caught me in the shed injecting myself, and I was trying to convince her it was vitamin C. But I think she was a bit too clever for that one. And I said, this is good. I'm going to be really sick. And, there was a miracle that day because my nephew, who I'd treated really badly, suddenly turned up. My mother maybe phoned him up, and he stayed for 2 weeks. And he started driving me to meetings every day. And wasn't part of AA, but he'd just go off and keep busy for the meeting, duration of the meeting. And I started that journey falling to my knees every morning. And I would pray that God would help me get through that day. And then I'd get into bed and I'd read what we have just read out this evening. And I'd get through my day. I'd go to a meeting. That first 2 weeks was absolute hell. That madness, just picking up the phone, putting it down, looking in the drink cabinet, and just, forever physically doing things which I didn't want to do, but I just couldn't stop. And but I managed to get through that time, and I I stayed sober, basically, did some meetings, did all of that, and then within 3 months I moved to Sydney, and I was scared moving there, I must admit, but I got organised. I had about $200 in my pocket. I bought a bicycle for $50. I moved into a backpackers. Within a couple of days, I found a house I could move into, which I moved in with 4 other people. I got a job straight away packing videos in a factory down South Park near the airport, and I'd cycle there every morning, and I would come back again, and I'd go and get some food. I'd go to the gym. I'd go and run around Centennial Park. I would and then I'd go and meet some people from the meetings and have dinner. Then we'd go to a meeting, and then I'd go and shoot pool till 10 o'clock at night. And then I'd just fall asleep and wake up and do the same thing the next day. And I was just that tired that I would just go out like a light. And Monday to Friday, that was my routine. I'd work, gym, eat, meeting. And then Saturday, I'd go to 3 meetings a day, because in Sydney there were masses of meetings. And then on Sunday, I'd do 3 meetings a day because I couldn't sit in my own head. I couldn't sit at home or in my room and just read a book. Couldn't do it. I couldn't stay in my own head. I had to keep busy. I had to keep that adrenaline flowing, which stopped me from thinking. And I was able to do that for quite a long time. And then I found this guy who I asked to be my sponsor. And one thing I heard is, if you want a sponsor, pray for him. Pray for a sponsor, because only God knows your future. Only God knows your direction, where you're going. And that was very, very important for me. And I started, just focusing. And I said, we're just going to focus for the first year. We're just going to focus on steps 1, 2, and 3. Help you to understand your disease. Admitting you're an alcoholic, but just seeing how it works in your life, realizing you can't do this on your own, and then you need power greater than yourself, and starting to make a decision to understand having God in your life. And for a whole year, that's it. I just did heaps of meetings and just focused on steps 1, 2, and 3. And when I was about a year sober, I had this great desire to write, and I started writing my life story. And I had, I don't know what it was, but it was just, I needed to get things down. And the more writing that I did, the more things I remembered. And all this stuff would start coming up. And I just put it down, pages and pages, whole folders of stuff. And one thing that I found out of doing all of that was that God had been looking after me all this time. That my life, I was very close to dying very many times. That story it brought up. Someone asked me to do a drug run from Bangkok to Geneva, 25 kilos in a suitcase, and I said okay, because I thought all I could think of was the 2,000 pounds I was going to be given, which would be cocaine for the summer. That's all I could think about. I didn't think that it would be the death penalty. I just thought of the other stuff. I did another one from India, France. I used to get beaten up a lot. Endless car crashes. I was in the wrong areas in New York, and I had police put guns to my head. Two different situations. just crazy stuff, overdoses, when you're doing heroin and stuff like that, not many people survive past 30. It's a killer thing, that one. And there were many things like that. And I realized that I had many situations where I should not be sitting where I was. And I realized that I'd been looked after. So that helped me to start to understand God and to start to understand my higher power and the direction and what my higher power wants for me too. And so that was really good. I really reflect on that a lot and think that was really necessary for me. We all have our own journey. I think we are all very different. We're all alcoholics, but I think our journeys are very different, and we just deal with them the way that they needed to be dealt with, whatever path you follow. And I think as long as you're not picking up that drink, then you're on the right path. And I've had situations where I've doubted my recovery. When I was about 5 years sober, I was living here in Adelaide, and I doubted my recovery because people were telling me that, not necessarily directly that I'm not an alcoholic, but basically, having to listen to people say I'm a real alcoholic and I'm doing it the way it's written in the big book and all this stuff. And it really made me think that I wasn't doing it right. And I remember having a situation where I had an argument with my then wife, and I stormed out of the house and went up to Bonython Park, and I just screamed, "God help me," because I couldn't deal with everything that was going on. I was mad at 5 years sober. I was absolutely mad. And I went down, and I went into a phone box, and I phoned up my sponsor, and he said, "What makes you think you're not doing the program? You've caused whatever problems you did in your home. You've realized that you need to hand this over to a higher power. You've gone up and handed your life over in the park to God. You're coming down here on the phone and doing your 4th and 5th with me right now. As you cross the road, you're going to start realizing your 6th and 7th and understanding your faults. And you're going to go and make your amends. And then you're going to, follow that up with trying not to repeat the same mistake." And it was a real affirmation as to realizing that I'm not the hopeless shit that I thought I was, that I'm not doing it all wrong, that I'm just trying to cover up. This is an amazing program. It really is. And it got to a point where at 15 years sober, about 10 years sober, we had a child together, and I never understood the word. I still don't understand it. I forgot what it is. Perfect love, or what's it called?
Well, unconditional.
Unconditional love. I couldn't understand what people were talking about because I was emotionless. I hadn't cried. 10 years in recovery, I could cry. I was crying out there. I had a total despair, but I couldn't cry in here. And my whole, everything just fell apart. My marriage fell apart. I lost contact with my 3-year-old son. I just lost everything. I was just void of just everything. And I upped my meetings. I joined groups. I was phoning my sponsor every day, and he said, "Just keep saying the Serenity Prayer as some sort of, just meditation. Just keep saying it, keep saying it." And it's very powerful, because the thing is, if I've got some stinking thinking, and all of a sudden I stop that stinking thinking to take the time out to say the Serenity Prayer, I've changed my thinking. And that thinking, once I've said it, could last for a good 4 minutes before I get back to the madness again. And if I keep saying it, all of a sudden that crazy head just dissipates, and I'm sort of on a right path. So that was really, so I was going just crazy. And 15 years sober, mad, crazy, doing lots of meetings, wondering why. I thought I was doing everything right. And my son, I picked him up one day, and we went past this church, and there were a whole load of people dressed up in Saxon clothes and leather smocks and wooden shields and wooden swords, and they're having a mock battle. And he sat on my lap, and we watched the whole thing. And then we drove off, and we went back a few weeks later, and I said, Matthew, we should go in there one day. And he said, let's go in now, Dad. I think he was hoping to find a little village of Saxons. But we parked the car and he went in, and the doors were huge, and masses of kids on the floor doing colouring, and he just went in and sat with them, and I sat at the back, and every time I heard the word Jesus, the hair on the back of my neck would stand up, and I'd feel so uncomfortable. But it's like AA, I knew I needed to be there, and I knew I needed to be here, but it was just getting comfortable. And I did what I did in AA. I moved to the front. I got involved. I did lots of workshops. And we did something called the Purpose-Driven Life, which is like 40 chapters, and each chapter is finding out what your purpose is in life. And, in AA, I think we're very lucky in that, because we know our purpose. It's to help the alcoholic that still suffers. So for me, it was a really good lesson of trying to center myself into understanding and believing in something that I didn't understand and believe. But I got through it. I got through all of that, and I started doing all the workshops and getting really involved. But what was happening is my meetings were sliding, because I was getting into another area, and this area was good. But once again, I felt that I needed AA, and like was written out here, faith without works is dead, and that really came to the forefront of my thinking. And I realized I needed to get back to AA, and I started this meeting here 17 years ago in another hall with a friend of mine who died a couple of years later, and his liver gave out in Bali in a hospital. And it's been going ever since, and I'm very grateful for that. We've got a great group members here that just keep it going and keep the laughter going and keep the enjoyment of what this program's about. It was a sad day today. I spoke to my wife. My wife's Balinese, and she lives in Bali, and we lost our son 5 years ago today. She was 5 months pregnant, and she was in tears and hugging a teddy bear, and there's a life can be sad, and life can be joyful. There are just many great things about living life without the need to put something in my system to deal with whatever's going on. And I think Lartha always says something which I always repeat, is like, if you hand your life over to a loving God, be prepared for future conflict. And that has always stood out for me, because I have had an awful lot of conflict in AA, in this journey. And I never thought it was good for me, because I always thought I was doing something wrong. But what I've realized is what it's doing for me is helping me to get closer to God. And that is, it's very, like they say, this program it's an amazing program. It works for those that believe in God. It works for those that don't believe in God. And it works for the poor unfortunates who believe they are God. And I've been all three in recovery, but today I feel more grace than I have, and it keeps growing, and I love it, and I have friends that I can talk to about this, and that's an amazing thing too. Not about what did you do last night, all the crap I used to talk. It's nice being able to center oneself in life. So thank you. I'm not going to carry on. This is a really good journey. It's difficult. And there are a lot of hardships, but there's a lot of joy, and I think it evens out in the end. I think that, and I've learned something very good from this man here, because I am always one that wants to stick my hands in the pie. I want to stir the pot, and his whole attitude is patience. What's the word you use? Oh. He uses a word, I can't remember what it is, but it's just like, just don't do anything. Just let it be. And I'm learning that one today, that I just allow the processes to happen and not get involved. And it's great. So thanks very much for listening. Thank you.
AA has more than 2 million recovering alcoholics throughout the world. In Australia, there are about 18,000 members. They meet in over 2,000 local meetings spread around the country. Meetings range in size from a handful in some areas to hundreds or more in larger communities. And once again, if anyone you know is struggling with alcohol issues, please call Alcoholics Anonymous in 1300 222222 or visit their website on aa.org.au.